All right, we're going to unpack this really fascinating survey today. It uncovers a huge disconnect in India's youngest generation. I'm talking about a massive gap between what they think they know about their health and what they're actually doing about it. It's a paradox, and honestly, the implications are pretty serious.
And that really brings us to this central question, doesn't it? We're talking about Gen Z here, the most connected, most online generation in history. So why, according to this new Medvarsity survey, does it seem like they're just ignoring a really critical health warning?
So the survey looked at folks between 18 and 30, and it found this really strange gap. On one hand, their awareness of a major health risk is super high. But on the other, that knowledge just isn't translating into action. And that, right there, is what we're calling the Gen Z paradox. Now, at first glance, things actually look pretty good. Check this out. Almost 70% of Gen Z say they've heard the term prediabetes. That sounds great, right? A really promising start. But, yeah, this is exactly where the story starts to get a whole lot more complicated.
Because, just hearing a word isn't the same thing as actually understanding the risk behind it. And that creates this illusion of awareness. It's like you know the title of the book, but you've never actually read it. That familiarity feels like knowledge, but it can be dangerously shallow.
So get this. Of that 70% who said, yeah, I've heard of it, a full quarter of them couldn't even define what prediabetes actually is. They were getting it confused with full-blown diabetes or, well, they just weren't sure at all. That tells you their awareness is, pretty brittle.
Okay, so let's just make sure we're all on the same page here. What is prediabetes? Think of it as this supercritical window. It's where your blood sugar levels are higher than normal, but not quite high enough to be diagnosed as type 2 diabetes. It's basically a warning shot from your body. And trust me, if you ignore it, things can progress very, very quickly.
And this quote from the report just hits the nail on the head. Awareness without understanding is a dangerous comfort zone. I mean, wow. Thinking you know the risk but not really getting the stakes, you could argue that's even more dangerous than being completely in the dark.
Okay, so this leads us to the next layer of this whole paradox. It's this psychological disconnect. You could almost call it an invincibility bubble. It's that classic gap between knowing something is a problem out there, in general, and really feeling like it could be a problem for you personally.
And just think about this for a second. A staggering 44% of these young adults have a family history of diabetes. I mean, that is a huge flashing red light. It's a crystal clear genetic risk factor that should be setting off all sorts of personal alarm bells.
But here's the thing. It doesn't. Even for the people who have a direct family link or who are even showing classic symptoms, that feeling of, hey, this could affect me, is just missing. The mindset that wins out is still, it won't happen to me.
And you can see the result of that mindset right here. When they were asked what they'd do if they actually had symptoms, nearly 40%, that's almost 4 out of 10, said they'd just wait and see. That's a massive number of people who would actively put off getting medical advice, basically just letting that critical window of opportunity start to close.
All right, and this brings us to what might be the most frustrating part of this whole puzzle. We're talking about the belief-behavior gap. It's this huge canyon between what Gen Z believes is possible and what they actually do day to day.
But there's a real glimmer of hope in this story, and it's a big one. A massive majority, 86%, believe that prediabetes is not a life sentence. They really believe it can be prevented or even reversed just by making lifestyle changes. So the optimism is definitely there.
But then, that optimism just collides head-on with reality. Their belief in prevention is totally at odds with their actual behavior. Look at this. Only 22% exercise every day, while almost a third say they rarely or even never exercise. That gap between belief and action, it's just stark.
So this isn't really a story about them not caring or not believing it's possible. As this quote points out, the real missing ingredients here are motivation and consistency. They know what they should be doing. They're just not doing it. So, the big question is, where do we go from here? Well, the survey actually points to a really surprising twist in this whole story, a place that might just hold both the problem and the solution. And here is the big reveal. Where is Gen Z actually getting their health information? It is not from the doctor's office. For more than half of them, their number one source for health info is social media. I mean, that just absolutely dwarfs the 27% who say they rely on doctors.
And this, of course, makes social media a really powerful double-edged sword. On one side, it's a huge risk, right? A place where misinformation can just spread like wildfire. But On the other side, it's this incredible opportunity to meet Gen Z exactly where they are and deliver credible, engaging, evidence-based health content.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. Let's talk about what this all means and why turning these early warning signals into real action is just so incredibly urgent.
First off, let's just talk about the sheer scale of the problem. Right now, there are over 100 million people in India living with diabetes. Just let that number sink in for a minute. This isn't some small niche issue. This is a full-blown national health crisis.
And that huge national crisis, it connects directly back to the generation we've been talking about. Research suggests that nearly 1 in every 5 young adults in India is already at risk of developing prediabetes. For millions of people, the clock is absolutely ticking.
But maybe the most powerful and hopeful takeaway is this one right here. Prediabetes is not a sentence. It's not the final verdict. It's a signal. Think of it like a warning light on your car's dashboard. It's giving you a crucial chance to change course before it's too late. Which leaves us with one last big question. We know Gen Z lives online. They build digital habits at lightning speed. So, if we can meet them in that digital world and make proactive health something that's engaging, simple, and actionable, could taking care of your health become their next great digital habit? The answer to that question might just determine the health of an entire generation.